The television studio in New York was pristine, an array of polished steel beams and gleaming glass surrounding the stage. The bright lights illuminated the faces of the political elite, but there, in the center of the arena, sat IBRAHIM TRAORÉ, the young president of Burkina Faso, a leader forged in the fire of a nation's struggle for dignity and independence. Across from him sat Donald Trump, his stern face betraying nothing, his cold eyes scanning the crowd like a king surveying his kingdom. The world was watching. This wasn't just another political debate. It was a confrontation, a moment in history that would echo across borders, reshaping the landscape of global diplomacy. Trump had long dismissed Traoré as a mere upstart, someone whose role on the world stage was temporary, insignificant. But today, the tables had turned. There was an undeniable tension in the air. The polished set, the cameras, the crowds, and the stakes. They all seemed to fade into the background as the two men prepared to face off. Traoré had arrived with the weight of his people on his shoulders, a leader who had borne the brunt of external exploitation, witnessing firsthand the devastation that came with foreign policies built on greed and dominance. He wasn't here just to argue. He was here to expose, to reveal the cracks in the system that Trump and his cohorts had built, and to stand for his nation's dignity. Trump, on the other hand, had long operated as a symbol of power. His policies, his businesses, his wealth, all signs of his unchallenged reign in the West. But this was a different terrain. This wasn't about boardrooms or luxury penthouses. This was a battle of ideals, a clash between the entrenched might of the West and the determined resilience of a rising Africa. The debate was supposed to be about trade, climate, and international relations. But as the minutes ticked by, it became clear that something much larger was at stake. Something far more personal. The first few exchanges were typical, rehearsed even. The world had seen this before. Arguments about tariffs, trade agreements, and economic priorities. But there was something simmering beneath the surface, a hidden tension that no one could ignore. "I've watched your policies tear apart nations." Traoré's voice broke through the typical politeness of the debate. His tone was quiet, yet firm, like a man who had seen the devastation of a broken world firsthand. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the change in direction. "But I also know that your hands are not clean, Mr. Trump. There is more to your story than you think." Trump didn't flinch. His steely gaze remained fixed on the young leader across from him. But the edge in Traoré's voice had reached him, and he knew that things were about to take a turn. The carefully constructed facade of political decorum had been shattered in a single line. The crowd was now on edge, leaning forward in anticipation of what would come next. "You think you control the narrative," Traoré continued, his voice unwavering, "but I have a different story to tell." The tension in the room became almost unbearable. No one knew what Traoré was about to reveal, but the silence spoke volumes. Trump's face had remained calm until this moment, but a subtle twitch of his jaw betrayed the slightest hint of anxiety. He had built his empire on secrets, on twisting the truth to fit his narrative. But now the young president of Burkina Faso, a nation that had long been overlooked by the global elite, was about to expose those secrets. And then it happened. The screens behind the two leaders flickered to life. The room went still as images flashed across the giant screens, images no one had ever seen before. Secret meetings in shadowy back rooms, hushed conversations between Trump and foreign leaders, financial transactions that connected him to corrupt regimes, and deals that had been made under the table. The revelations were stunning, a history of backdoor politics, of greed, of alliances that betrayed the very people they were supposed to serve. The audience gasped. The quiet murmur of disbelief filled the studio as Trump's face, once impassive, drained of color. His eyes locked on the screen, but his body remained rigid, as if bracing for the worst. The truth, long hidden in the shadows, was now laid bare before the world. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" Traoré's voice rang out, steady, but full of purpose. "But we've all seen what you've done. The truth will always come to light." Trump's fists clenched involuntarily. His mask of control was slipping, the reality of his actions crashing into the space he had so carefully crafted. The images were damning, the timeline undeniable. There was no escaping it, no spinning it into a narrative that could save him. The years of manipulation, of twisting facts to fit his agenda, were now unraveling before everyone's eyes. The crowd was in shock. Some whispered among themselves, others remained silent, unable to fully comprehend the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. This wasn't just a political debate anymore. This was a battle for truth, for justice, for the very soul of global power dynamics. Traoré had come with more than just words. He had come with undeniable evidence, a weapon more powerful than any speech or debate could ever be. Trump stood, his movements stiff and calculated. The air around him was charged with a strange mix of disbelief and fury. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, as if trying to steady himself. For a brief moment he looked like a man who had been caught in a trap of his own making. The man who had once thrived on control, on dominance, now stood vulnerable before the world. "This is a witch hunt," he shouted, his voice cracking with the intensity of his denial. "You have no right. This is all lies. Fake news." But the words felt hollow, empty. The audience wasn't fooled. The evidence was irrefutable. His past had been exposed, and there was no escaping the truth now. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. And then, Traoré, without hesitation, simply nodded. "No, Mr. Trump. This is justice. This is the truth." As the words echoed in the studio, Trump's defiance crumbled. His shoulders slumped as the realization settled in. This wasn't just a political loss. It was a personal one. His empire, built on deceit and manipulation, had been toppled by the most unlikely of people, a young African leader who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The audience, once divided by their allegiance to power, now found themselves united in one collective truth. The leader who had stood against the tide of global manipulation, who had fought for his people, had just exposed the very system that had oppressed them. There was no victory dance for Traoré, no dramatic outburst. He simply sat there calm, composed, as the world watched in awe. He had done what no one thought was possible. He had taken down a giant with nothing more than the truth. Trump, the other hand, stood frozen, a man undone by his own actions. His empire was no longer invincible. His past had caught up with him, and there was no running from the consequences now. The world had seen him for what he truly was, and there was no turning back. The broadcast ended, the camera slowly pulling away from the two figures. The lights in the studio dimmed, but the weight of what had just transpired lingered in the air like a thunderstorm on the horizon. In the quiet that followed, the world took a collective breath, knowing that this was the moment that would change everything. The truth once buried had been set free, and no amount of denial could ever put it back in the shadows. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing for more inspiring tales of truth, justice, and political change. Hit the like button and share this with someone who needs to hear this message today. In a world of uncertainty, the truth is the most powerful weapon we have.